President Biden currently off the ballot in the state of Alabama due to essentially a clerical error, if you will, by the Biden campaign booking the convention too late in the game. We just had, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or on aclj.org, you just saw some highlights from different news sources. One was an Alabama representative saying, hey, I'm already drafting a bill to fix this because, look, we still got 9 legislative days before we take a break from summer. 9 days. So if this hadn't come up in the next week, 2 weeks, let's say, of work weeks, there's a good chance, a real chance, President Biden not on the ballot. Let's go ahead and start taking some phone calls. I want to hear from Ronald first, who's watching on Rumble, living in South Carolina. Ronald, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. What I've come to find out from all that is happening is that every trick and everything that they threw at Trump to try and destroy him and try to get him out of these ballots on each of the states and things have literally come back on them in droves. I mean, it is getting to the point to where it is ridiculous. Everything they've tried, now they're going to have to wade through and try and finagle their way out of.
Well, and Ronald, it does seem that this is the latest symptom of Trump derangement syndrome, where you have seen for years, almost 8 years now, that Democrats have done everything they can to try and either get President Trump out of office while he still was sitting president, and now to keep him from running again. But when you have a political party like the DNC, their entire role is to set the convention, to structure things. It is separate from even the Biden campaign. Yeah. So their one job is to make sure that they get ballot access in all 50 states by certifying at the right times. They coordinate with the campaign when these filings are going to happen to make sure that their nominee is on the ballot. Where were the teams of lawyers at the DNC? Do they not have a running tally of dates of when they have to certify to make sure that their paperwork is in on time?
There's not an Excel document somewhere floating around that says they need to do this. It's absurd, but he is right. Ronald's right, because you have even situations like the documents. They make a big deal. If this was no one could believe that there was classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. And then it's like, guess what? Classified documents at the Biden, every sort, in what felt like random hotel rooms across the country. This is what not actually random hotel rooms across the country, but it felt like they kept being discovered in random places next to in the garage
under a 1997 television, TV.
Yeah, exactly. It's like for a rainy day, gotta crank out those old VHSs. Let's go to Jim, who's calling, watching on YouTube. Jim, you're on the air in Kansas.
Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call. I'm in favor of keeping Biden on the ballot. I'd like to see a debate between Kennedy, Trump, and Biden, if that could be possible.
Absolutely, Jim. I think that I would like to see that as well. And I think if you see RFK having some pops here and there, you may see that happen. I mean, if he starts getting to a certain threshold, Kennedy, is there a point where he gets on that stage? Right now, the Biden administration has not even acknowledged that he's running. They have all been solely focused on Trump. And now, I mean, you could say that Trump is the only real viable opponent in terms of actual numbers here, but I would love to see it.
I remember the debates, even as I was young at the time, but between George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Ross Perot, and then even
Nader later on,
right? And that these things have happened in recent history. The problem here is that I don't think either Trump nor Biden really want to go through the process of the Presidential Debate Commission because of how poorly the debates were run back in 2020. The moderators that are picked, you never feel like you're getting someone in there that's asking hard questions of both people. And it doesn't feel like the events that they used to be where you got a clash of ideas. Instead, it seems like a referee that is tipping their hand to one side instead of the other.
Yeah, it's always a mess now, unfortunately. We saw a little bit better on some of the more recent debates, but I think it's going to be a long time till maybe you'll have a president. I think you probably will have a Trump-Biden debate. I think there'll probably be one, maybe. But also, I could see him going, this just doesn't sway enough people, so it's not worth it. Let's continue on, take some calls. So many of you are calling in on this topic. I want to get to as many of you as possible. Next up, Rachel, who's calling in the state of Texas. Go ahead.
Hey, if Alabama and Ohio, they need to stick it to the DNC, because if this were Donald Trump, they've got whole legal cases hinging on technicalities. There's no way that they would allow this if it were Trump.
I think you're right, Rachel, and I think that's sort of the big conundrum we've had. It's sort of like impeachment, which is the idea of, do you stoop to their level? It's the if they go low, you go lower situation. That is the where we've kind of been pushing against. And I think for the betterment of the country, we should be pushing against that. However, I can't tell you that it doesn't make it a little harder when you see what they'll put people through.
Well, and the difference here is that it's not like these secretaries of state are like the Secretary of State of Colorado that was actively trying to remove the candidate from the ballot. The secretaries of state in these respective states, both in Ohio and Alabama, are saying, this is our law. It exists. We didn't make this up just to stop the DNC because we knew when their convention was being held. No, the law was on the books, and the DNC scheduled their convention in spite of that law.
Yeah.
So it's not the same as saying that, oh, conservatives are now trying to take Biden off the ballot. No, they're just saying, here's our law, and actually we believe in the rule of law, unlike many Democrats.
Right.
And so we're going to follow that until we find some sort of amenable way to get around that, if that's what you're looking for, whether that be you having a nominating convention actually before your convention date, or whether the state legislature changes the law. But that's how America works. That's how laws work. It doesn't just say, well, the law says this, but, you know, he is the sitting president, so we're just going to let it slide. No, then you'd have legal challenges saying you can't just change the law unilaterally.
Let's go to Rebecca, who's calling in New Hampshire on line 6. Rebecca, you're on the air.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. Revenge is the Lord, so it's not ours. That's what the Bible tells us.
Yeah, and I assume that you're saying just based on like the political situation here, like don't take out our frustrations. Let God handle that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see your point there, and I don't disagree with you. I think that is the right thing to do. However, as Will pointed out, this is not revenge in the sense of the traditional sense, where we are not. No Republican is out there right now saying push for Biden. I mean, there are people, but that are legitimate saying Biden shouldn't be on the ballot. They just didn't follow the rules that they set.
Yeah, and to Rebecca's point, that is very similar to what Rick Grinnell was saying, is that we actually want it to be a fair election because we want to win an election. Conservatives tend to want to win an election on the ideas. Democrats many times want to win on technicalities or by getting an unfair advantage. And so to Rebecca's point, there could be moments for revenge by certain state legislators that maybe say, hey, we're not even going to take up the bill if one is put forward, like we know is being put forward in Alabama, and probably one will soon be put forward in Ohio to try to amend the law. That's also not unprecedented, by the way. I believe in some states in 2020, because of the way that the conventions were, some states had to give an exception to the Republican Party for Donald Trump to appear on the ballot because they were trying to figure out how to do a convention, and we did like the remote conventions, and so technically the convention was later. And some of these states did in that time afford that exception or exemption to President Trump, but it was done through the legislature the right way.